All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathy Chan, and I am the acting director of the CSRS for the 2022-23 academic year. Tonight's special public lecture is being co-hosted by two of the University of Victoria's research centers, the Center for Studies in Religion and Society and the Center for Asia Pacific Initiatives. On behalf of myself and Pooja Parmar, acting director of the Center for Asia Pacific Initiatives, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. I'd like to open tonight's lecture by acknowledging and respecting the Lekwungen peoples on whose traditional territory the University of Victoria sits, and the Songhees, the Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples who have continuing historical relationships with that land. We are lucky to have two esteemed speakers with us tonight, Dr. Zohra Batul and Dr. Reeta Tremblay. I'll just briefly introduce each of them. Dr. Tremblay is a Canadian political science and former senior administrator at the University of Victoria. She has written widely on comparative politics and the global South and is an internationally recognized expert on Kashmir and on India-Pakistan relationships. Dr. Batul comes to us tonight from New Delhi, where she has recently submitted her PhD thesis entitled Religion, Public Sphere, and Political Mobilization, a Case of Mosques and Shrines in Kashmir Valley at the Department of Political Science, Jamia, Millia, Islamia. Her research and writings have appeared in a number of publications, including Economic and Political Weekly, South Asian Review, The Telegraph, Greater Kashmir, and other local and national newspapers. Her main research interests lie in religion, gender, and spatial politics, lived religion and post-colonial studies, the public sphere in non-Western societies, and political mobilization and conflict, with a focus on Islam and South Asia. And I really look forward to hearing what both Reeta and Zohra have to say to us tonight about the role of sacred sites within Kashmir's contentious politics. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'm on. Thank you, Kathy, for your very kind introduction. And also thank you to Pooja, Cappy, and CSRS for giving us the opportunity to share our ideas. This talk is largely about Zohra's research on the multifaceted role of sacred sites, Sufi shrines and mosques, and political mobilization in the Kashmir Valley. Given the complexity of the contentious politics, my role is very limited today. I'm going to provide you a general background to this contentious politics, about 10 minutes or so, and then I'm going to pass it on to Zohra. Before starting, let me say a few words about our collaboration, Zohra and mine. We are both interested in understanding the dynamic and fluid interaction between religion, secularism, secularization, and the social processes, and how all these work their way through society within a localized context. And here we are basically talking about the Indian state or region of Jammu and Kashmir. For us, the social, political, and religion do not operate as distinct domains. Instead, there is the non-linear interaction of the religions and political spheres of life. And this is the theoretical context for our collaboration and for our work. And Zohra, if you can just move the slide, next slide. So here's my edited book, Religion and Politics in Jammu and Kashmir. And I see Andrew Bender is here in the audience. So Andrew is a contributor to it, and Zohra's 2 articles. Basically, our arguments in today's presentation are twofold. Zohra, if you can move the slide. So our arguments are twofold. First, part of this talk's argument fundamentally is that religion and its artifacts perform more than a spiritual role in the public sphere of Kashmir Valley. In other words, mosques and shrines are crucial sacred spaces where the political struggles get played out. On the one hand, they act as an alignment between the microstructures of everyday life and macro structures of economic and social justice. And on the other hand, the political leaders see shrines and mosques as a ready-made platform for propagating their ideologies. And our second argument is that sacred sites are complex spaces where dominant ideologies are simultaneously reproduced, but are also resisted. In other words, sacred spaces cannot be viewed in one particular hegemonic form. Instead, there are variations between them in terms of ideological inclinations, people's participation, and mobilization patterns. Mosques are typically related to puritanical Islam, and shrines in Kashmir can assimilate different cultures. They're more open to women, and many think of shrines as a feminine space. But this variation gets muted when Indian authorities close the mosques and shrines, detain the priests, head priests, and others, and they see the mosques and shrines as a trouble spot, a nerve center for protests and contestation, fundamentally challenging the Indian sovereignty. In the next slide, you'll see that there is a recent photo, 2021 photo of the largest shrine in Srinagar, where actually Zohra is today, Jamia Masjid. This shrine holds about 33,000 worshippers. And on special occasions, you'll see hundreds of thousands of Muslims basically fill nearby lanes and roads to offer prayers, which are led from the mosque. And this shrine, this is a scene of the recent shutdown, and it was shut down for weeks and weeks and months. Now, moving on to our talk, this talk is divided into 4 parts. And Zohra is going to move to that one. And so 4 parts, I'm going to talk about a little bit, give you the background, a quick primer on Kashmir. And Zohra is going to pick up the other 3 pieces. Why study sacred spaces? She's going to look at the relationship between public sphere and shrines, and then look at the 2 fundamentally, Jama Masjid and the shrine Hazrat Bal Dargah. Now let's look at the quick primer about Kashmir. First thing to remember is when we talk about the contentious politics in Kashmir, and I refer you to the map, we are only talking about the valley, and that's in the light purple area. It's Kashmir Valley and Srinagar, where right now Zohra is, and we are not talking about the complete region. So Jammu, for example, here in the salmon color is largely majority Hindu, and Ladakh, which is on the western side, northwest, is half Buddhist and half Muslim. But when we talk about the contentious politics, it's really about the valley. The valley is 96% Muslim, mostly Sunnis. It is the foundational ground for the emergence of the nationalist movement against the Hindu ruler before India became independent, the Hindu rulers, the Dogras. And then post 1947, it has been the major source of conflict between India and Pakistan. But also post 1947, there's been a consistent and persistent problem for India, that India has faced demands from the Kashmiri Muslims for autonomy and azadi, freedom from India. Moving to the next slide, Kashmiri Muslims fundamentally for centuries have considered themselves to be occupied, conquered by foreign rulers. They feel that they have been occupied, conquered, and have not been free since the 16th century. First occupied by Mughals, then Afghans, then by Sikhs, and then finally sold by the British to the Hindu rulers, the Dogras, in 1846 to show their gratitude for the Dogra help in defeating the Sikhs in Punjab. And they feel now, under the Indian state since 1947, they've been occupied. But it's really an interesting fact that none of the Muslim rulers prior to the Mughals actually were native Kashmiris. They came from neighboring regions, but the idea of conquest continues to be present till this day. So in short, what one can say is that demands for azadi or freedom are both contemporary and historical. Now, I'm just going to bring you back to the contemporary demands and show you their origin quickly before I pass it on to Zohra. And I'll show you 4 maps in 2 successive slides. So if you look at the map 1 on the left-hand side, that's the British map here of 1937. And that's what the British India looked like. All the purple zones were 60% of British India, was directly ruled by the British. So when we talk about India, that was British India, and that's the purple one. All the yellows were about 560 princely states, and they had a very indirect relationship with the British. And when the British were to leave in 1947, they are going to divide their British India part, the purple one, into Pakistan and in India, and all the princely states became independent. At this time, you have advice given by the British to all the princely states that you are so small, you should try to integrate either with India and Pakistan. Almost all princely states integrate with either India or Pakistan, except 3, and Jammu and Kashmir was one of them. And the Maharaja of Jammu, Hindu ruler, refused to join either state. There was a tribal invasion from northwestern provinces of Pakistan. At that time, the Maharaja requested treaty of accession with India. India sends its troops, liberates 2/3 of the Kashmir. So this other map on the right-hand side is basically shows the division. So this part, the yellowish part, is with India, 2/3, and the top part here, northern and a little bit of the western part, is with Pakistan, 1/3. Moving to the next slide, you'll see that India begins to do all the integration at this time. And when it does the integration, and in accepting the Treaty of Accession of Jammu and Kashmir, it creates a very special provision for its inclusion in the Indian Constitution. And that's Article 370. And it creates what we call it federal asymmetrical arrangement, whereby it provides autonomy to the state of Jammu and Kashmir and only gives 3 matters of foreign affairs, communication, and currency to the Indian government. And so that state, in that process, what we see is the map you see in 1956, that's the map which prevailed till 2019. But what we start seeing from early 1950s till about late 1970s, a very a slow process of the abandonment of federal asymmetry provisions. There is a slow dissolution of the status, except 2 provisions: ownership of land and employment to be limited to Kashmiri citizens. The second thing we see that there's no democratic space provided for dissenting groups. From the very beginning, there's been a banning of dissenting groups, usage of coercive measures, consistent presence of army, curfew, arrests of political dissenters, control of internet when the internet started, and more or less always persistent shutdown of mosques and shrines. In 1989, there was a full-blown political insurgency in the Kashmir Valley and would demand complete separation from India. After 2019, we are in a completely different status. You have the whole federal asymmetrical provision removed by the BJP government. It revokes Article 370, divides the state into 2 union territories, thus bringing the valley into completely centralized control, and there is no elected government. So I'm going to stop here and going to pass it on to Zohra.
Good evening. I would like to begin by thanking CAPI and CSRS for hosting this talk, and to everyone present here for joining today. Thank you so much. The section of the talk that I'll be dealing with today mainly are holy sites, as public sphere, the nature of space, shrines and mosques provide to the people of Kashmir Valley, and also the link between mobilization and sacred spaces within the context of the rising insurgency. Then I'll go on to discuss my case studies, that is Hazrat Bal Dargah and Jamia Masjid, both located in urban Kashmir Valley, more specifically their role in facilitating activism from the premises. This talk is, as Professor Reeta mentioned, part of a scholarship that draws inspiration from the rapidly growing literature on Islam as embodied practice. Let me start off by discussing why study sacred spaces. The continuous conflict situation in societies with Muslim majority has intensified the debate around Islamic exceptionalism and Islam's compatibility with democracy. With the turmoil in the Middle East, North Africa, such as the rise of ISI, Arab Spring, or the recent takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban, and similar conflictual situation in post-colonial societies with Muslim majority, such as Palestine or Kashmir, the political problem that has troubled most of the world, and in particular the West, is the issue of Islamic fundamentalism. Meanwhile, the movement for political and civil rights in Muslim societies often unfold itself in Islamic language, which is typically recast as radical jihad, whereas mosques and other religious institutions are seen as breeding grounds of radicalism. This overly simplistic and polarized understanding of political movements in terms of religious and secular is not without dangerous political implications. At the theoretical level, it leads to analytical negligence and also endurance of biased public narratives. Whereas in actual politics, such framing is used to, discredit the authenticity of political movements, but also to justify repression and surveillance. Therefore, by exploring mosques and shrines as part of the public sphere in Muslim societies, the intention is to highlight the significantly complex role sacred spaces and religion perform in contentious politics, which is largely unexplored in Kashmir's context. In recent years, studies of religion and the impact of its senses on society and politics have gained considerable attention among political scientists, especially those working in Muslim societies, such as, some prominent work includes the work of Talal Asad, Sabah Mahmood, Charles Hirschkind, Patrick Eisenlohr, among others. However, the existing scholarship on political mobilization, spatial politics, and the public sphere in Kashmir has not substantially dealt with the role of Islam and its symbols, mainly mosques and shrines. They tend to be much more focused on macro nationalist issues. Professor Reeta also argues in her book that religion is intertwined with nationalism. In the case of Jammu and Kashmir, religious and national boundaries often coincide. Therefore, we believe that a study of religion and its artifacts are crucial at this moment. These sacred spaces might fail the standards of an ideal public sphere if judged from secular liberal epistemology, yet they provide a very significant space where from ordinary people can assemble, deliberate, and dissent. Now I will talk about little bit about Sufism and shrines, as they form an essential part of Kashmir's religious culture. Kashmir is famously known as Pirwar, that is the garden of Sufis and saints. There are thousands of mosques and shrines in Kashmir. Kashmir is in fact believed to be created into an Islamic space through the intervention of Sufis and their disciples, which makes Sufism an essential part of Kashmir's religious culture. The major Sufi orders in Kashmir are the Naqshbandi, the Qadri, the Shurhavardi, and the Rishis. All except the Rishis have their origin in Iran and Central Asia, and they largely promoted, Puranitical Islam, whereas Rishis were local or native mystics, and they were more inclined towards syncretic spiritual culture. The local Rishis were greatly influenced by different religious movements, including Shivaism, Buddhism, Tantrism, and Islam. Therefore, many of their shrines were not only revered by the Muslims but also by the Hindus, including the shrine of Baba Zainuddin at Ashmukam or the shrine of Sheikh Hamza Makhdoom, in addition to other shrines. The shrine of Sufis gradually became the agent of spiritual, economic, and literary transformation. These traveling Sufis also played an important role in disseminating new crafts and skills. It is believed that Shah-e Hamdan, one of the most respected, Sufis in Kashmir, came with an influx of immigrant artists, calligraphists, and architects. The art of wood carving, carpet weaving, paper mache prospered during the reign of Muslim king Sultan Zainul Abidin. The Sultan or Muslim kings also consulted these Sufis on religious or administrative matters. Therefore, they had a decent influence over politics. Sultan Qutbuddin from Shahmi dynasty, who ruled Kashmir between 1354 to 1373 CE, granted the revenue of many villages for the upkeep of the shrines. During the early 20th century, not many Muslim Kashmiris were literate. Consequently, oral history and storytelling came to play a very prominent part in disseminating information. Within the culture of oral history and storytelling, the shrines acted as a venue where local tellers and people connected. The local Ladisha or Bangat means storytellers and minstrels, employed poetical satire to describe the political condition of society as well as to portray everyday life. The holy sites also provided space for the local poet, who would often express their grievances through their poems on holy occasions or simply in Friday congregations. One example is the Persian Naat. Naat means poetry in praise of Prophet Muhammad by Maulvi Abul Rasul Khan Kavi of Sharari Sharif, where he talks about the oppression of Afghan rulers in Kashmir. He writes, and I quote, "Terror is the Afghan rule, tyranny is its content. Let you now, O our beloved Prophet, benumb their tyrant hands." Unquote. The shrines in Kashmir traditionally maintained kitchen and langars where food was served to people from different societal sections. The urus or the fairs at the shrine, that is the birth and death anniversary of a Sufi saint, became an occasion for people to visit the shrine from diverse geographical areas and locations. Besides, the bazaar outside of shrines and mosques provided an opportunity for urban and rural people to interact. Now I will, go on to contextualize sacred spaces as, a public sphere. Holy sites in Kashmir are well known for their involvement in contentious politics and have proved themselves quite crucial for creating shared identity and meaning. Place of worship creates setting for people to discuss social and political concerns, whereas the vibrant markets surrounding the shrines and mosque is a vital source of income and activities for the locals. They became even more significant due to restriction on any form of congregation to contain political agitation. Moreover, a lot of everyday important matters are brought before masjid councils, and committees are formed from the premises of the mosque to deal with the unanticipated predicaments of conflicts, such as to follow up legal cases. One such committee was Majlis-e Mushawrat. The Majlis in Shupain was formed in the summer of 2009 with the stated objective of achieving justice for murder and rape victim from the state's legal institution. Similarly, another important Masjid committee known as Kani Mazar Nawakadal Masjid Committee was formed to collect money for the reconstruction of houses burned during encounter operations between the state armed forces and the militant. Kani Mazar Nawa Kadal Masjid Committee claimed that it has gathered up to 3 crore rupees, that is 4 lakh US dollar, to rebuild the houses destroyed during encounters. Besides, the organization associated with the sacred space also performs several other social welfare functions, such as distribute money among the poor, widows, or also run educational institutions. At the same time, the space of mosques and shrines have been crucial to the political development of anti-regime movement in Kashmir historically. During demonstration, they are employed to spread the political message through sermons by religio-political leaders, ushering in new supporters and ideological commitment for Kashmir's political cause. These sermons and call for azadi, that is freedom, also enters the private sphere of a household due to the employment of loudspeakers in sermon deliveries. On several occasions, the dead bodies of militants killed in encounter operations are handed over to the local mosque for public funeral attended by thousands of people, which often ends up in clash between the security forces and the protesters. The network of mobilization at sacred spaces in Kashmir are mostly spontaneous and on many occasions leaderless. Thus, the space created by sacred sites serve as a space of opposition as well as contestation. In fact, contentious politics is internal to the whole process of participating in the environment of piety. The namaz followed by sloganing creates the condition of an ethical world where commitment to Kashmir's political movement is as sacred as the space itself. The whole sensory experience of listening to sermons and visuals also strengthen the supplicant's will and commitment while emphasizing Muslim brotherhood. The participation in the words of a supplicant, and I quote, enables him to stay connected with the noble values of Islam in a world full of evil distraction, unquote. Let me just say a quick word about gender politics here. The case of sacred spaces explains how conflict, religion, and gender politics mutually shape and impact the other. Despite the perspective that the relationship between women and Islam is mainly based on piety, which I do not deny, it would be wrong to characterize women involvement in shrine and mosque ritual as an abandonment of any form of politics. On the other hand, the space they produce has different layers of politics, including gender, religious, and conflict. There is a spatial marginalization at most of the sacred spaces, including the two case studies that I'll be taking. Yet they offer women both social as well as political space. They are instrumental in creating political awareness about Kashmir's movement among women. At shrine, both men and women listen to the khutbahs, that is sermons, and occasionally when there is protest after prayers, some women also participate. Hence, it also acts as a space of collective action. Thus, even though the control of the sacred spaces remains with the men who act as a guardian of these sacred spaces, women negotiate sacred spaces to produce a socially engaged religion. So now I'll discuss my two case studies, that is Hazrat Bal Dargah and Jamia Masjid. I take the case study of Jamia Masjid and Hazrat Bal Shrine to explore their varied political potential and role in the movement closely. I employ the case studies to argue that the place of deliberation are not always based on rationalism and secularism in non-Western societies. There have been several instances when these two holy places challenge the state's sovereignty through collective action. Before I move forward with my case studies, I would like to just highlight certain factors that sets Jamia Masjid apart from other sacred spaces in Kashmir, including Hazrat Bal. First of all, Jamia Masjid and Hazrat Bal has historically has a noteworthy parallel trajectory in terms of their political positionality, which I will elaborate in my case study. Besides, Jamia Masjid has its own, independent body governing it called Anjuman-e-Aqaf. It is headed by the Mirwais, who is the head priest of Jamia Masjid, whereas most of the other sacred spaces in Kashmir, including Hazrat Bal, is governed by Jammu and Kashmir Aqaf Board, that is government sponsored. Besides, Jamia Masjid is more active even in contemporary times politically than any other sacred spaces in the valley, including Hazrat Bal. So coming to my first case study, that is Jamia Masjid. It has historically acted as a religio-political space and remains so even in contemporary times. However, Jamia Masjid was not always effectively available for anti-regime activities. Yusuf Shah, the Mirwais means the head priest of Jamia Masjid, was involved in a struggle for leadership against the newly emerging Muslim nationalist leaders. Therefore, he largely avoided any form of, confrontation with the Hindu Maharaja, which could have weakened his position. Mridu Rai, one of the most prominent, political scientists working on Kashmir, argues that Mirwais Yusuf Shah largely acted as a restraining influence on any radical opposition towards the state. Whereas today, Jamia Masjid represents the interest of the current Mirwais-led Awami Action Committee and acts as one of the leading platform for opposition leader in the valley. The political leaders from two main, local political parties hardly visit Jamia Masjid because of Mirwais' complete control over the masjid and also the nearby area. And the reason for that is Mirwais does not, agree, or he disagrees with the ideology of political parties who takes part in election, because he believes that Kashmir is a disputed territory. The matter is still not settled. At Jamia Masjid, the present Mirwais, that is Mirwais Umar Farooq, gives his sermons. Mirwais Umar Farooq of Jamia Masjid not only has the power of platform and prestige, but 1400 years of Islamic heritage to back his legitimacy. Apart from religious preaching, Mirwais Umar Farooq also sends political message from the platform of Jamia Masjid. He gives khutbah, that is sermons, every Friday, where both men and women listens to him, and occasionally he gives his khutbah in other shrines, including Dastagir Sahab. As you can see in these images, that there is a huge security forces outside of Jamia Masjid, and you can also see that the kind of audience that Mirwais Farooq has. And the reason for this tight security is that he often leads demonstration after prayers, which often ends up with clash between the armed forces and the locals. In an interview with reddit.com, Umar Farooq stated, and I quote, "My sermon has two parts. The first is completely religious, while the second political. The Jamia Masjid, from where I make my sermons, also serve as the main political stage in the valley, so I'm playing both the roles as not different entities, but one," unquote. Some of the sermons by Mirwais Umar Farooq are also available on YouTube. Besides, he gives frequent interviews to national and international media. In his sermons, broadly, he talks about azadi, that is independence, zulm, that is tyranny, political solution of the Kashmir issue, and so on. He also gives considerable attention to the plights of the Muslims worldwide. Some of the highlights for Mirwais Umar Farooq's speech and Jamia Masjid are, so the translation is mine. He says, "With great regret, we have to say that there is a trend of Islamophobia and an attempt at the almi level, that is international level, to defame Islam. The people of Kashmir have been sacrificing their lives since 1931 for their rights. In this rightful struggle for the haq, that is rights of the people of Kashmir, the Jamia Masjid Committee has played and still plays an essential role. 70 years have passed. It's Kashmir's fourth generation, and yet the Kashmir issue has not progressed anywhere. Mirwais Yusuf Shah also stated the same thing. After him, my father, Shaheed-e-Millat, that is martyr of the nation, Mirwais Maulana Farooq, and since I took over as the Mirwais at the age of 17, I'm also asserting the same thing, as it is a matter of right and sadaqat, that is principles." He further adds, "I want to tell the Indian government, you are looking for my assets. My assets are my people, my Kashmiri people. While people sloganing, Mirwais tera ek ishara, jaan hamari hazir hai, will give our life on Mirwais indication. ये मुल्क हमारा है, इसका फैसला हम करेंगे. This country belongs to us and we shall decide the future of our country." In his sermons, Mirwais encapsulates the essential of Kashmir dispute. His sermons also make his position both as a religious and political leader fairly clear. He reminds people of the legacy he comes from, also the sacrifices of his family for Kashmir's cause. While voicing concerns and enlightening people on multiple issues facing Kashmir, he's attentive to highlight the link between the political movement and Jamia Masjid. At the same time, the slogan by the people display their faith in Mirwais and a strong desire to be part of, any resolution on the future of Kashmir. Mirwais sermons also interlink two important themes, that is God's punishment on the day of judgment and the adversities Muslims face today. Another, important sacred site in Kashmir is the Dargah Hazrat Bal. It has great symbolic and social value for the people of Kashmir. The shrine is the repository of Prophet Muhammad's buried here, that is known as Moe Muqaddas. The ziyarat, which means visitation of the holy relic, is certainly the valley's most important annual religious event. Many people in Kashmir believe that the presence of the holy relic at Hazrat Bal preserves the entire locality from disasters such as fire or even COVID 19. The believers also have numerous names for Hazrat Bal shrines, such as Rahmatul Alameen, which means mercy for all the world, or Markaz, which means center of one's life. Hazrat Bal became the most vital and vocal stage of Kashmir's politics in the 1930s. Many Muslim political leaders during their nationalist struggle against Hindu rulers used Friday congregation for political mobilization and participated in religious festivals like Miladun Nabi, that is Prophet's birthday, and Mirajul Alam, the day commemorating Prophet's heavenly journey. And they also participated in regular Friday congregation to establish ties with both urban and rural Kashmiris. Sermons and speeches by political leaders had become a primary event at Hazrat Bal. Hazrat Bal Shrine continues to remain at the political forefront in the valley, and numerous protests have been organized from its vicinity. The 27 December 1963 disappearance of Moe Muqaddas was a monumental episode in the political history of Kashmir. The agitation over the theft of prophets here left the then Prime Minister of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, to reconsider the fundamental premise of India's Kashmir policy. The agitation also brought down the short regime of Khwaja Shamsuddin, the then Prime Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, who was replaced with Ghulam Muhammad Siddiq of the Indian National Congress to contain the agitation. Professor Reeta writes, and I quote, sometimes demands made in the name of religion are formulated alongside those made in the name of nationhood. And other times, political demand made in the name of ethnicity and nationhood have a deep relationship with religion as a powerful framework for imagining community, unquote. Likewise, the whole episode related to the loss of prophets here ultimately provoked people's demand for political rights and protection of Kashmiri Muslim identity. And this was also evident in the slogans raised in the local mosque at that time, such as Nare Takbir Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest, Hazrat Bal Chalo, March to Hazrat Bal, Islam Zindabad, long live Islam, and we want Azadi, that is freedom. In another rally at Lal Chowk, similar slogans were raised for plebiscite by the rally participant, including we want immediate recovery of Moe Muqaddas, we want plebiscite. Patrick Eisenlaw, in his study of sonic dimension of religious devotional practice among Muslims in Mauritius, establishes how Naat performance, Naat means poetry written in praise of Prophet, creates an atmosphere that compels those listening to become monumentally part of a larger or collective entity with a somatically based experience. Relatedly, the slogans and sermons for a common sentimentalized cause, such as the theft of the most sacred relic, serve to unite people in a bond of common sympathy and action by evoking the sentiment of Kashmiri Muslim Qawm, that is nation. Hazrat Bal returned to the political forefront yet again on 15th of October 1993 when a group of militants held hostage inside the shrine. And on October 22, that is 8th day of the siege, approximately 10 to 15,000 people gathered in the Jamia Masjid of Bij Bihara. They were demonstrating against the blockade set up by the state security forces, surrounding the shrine, and an earlier incident of firing upon the protester. The All-Party Hurriyat Conference, one of the leading separatist group in Kashmir, also organized protest march. And during one of the speech, Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani, a very popular and prominent separatist leader, stated that, and I quote, "The Prophet Mosque at Medina was also used for combat purposes," unquote. Gilani further added that the siege of the Dargah by the army is violating the sanctity of the shrine. Gilani's statement underlines the desire of political leaders to bring religion and its concomitant emotions into contentious politics. Soon afterward, different political, organizations and groups from the valley demanded that the security bunkers surrounding the shrine should be removed to restore a pre-15th October position, that is pre-siege status. They argued that it will, help them clean the shrine and also display the holy relic. Uh, Initially, the government was not ready to remove the bunker for security purposes, but eventually, after huge protests for 10 months, they decided to remove the security bunker surrounding the shrines. So, in most instances, these agitation would initially start on religious line, but eventually take a political turn and activate the desire for Rai Shumari, that is good governance. These events also display Shrine's capacity to induce mobilization due to the moral obligation upon the pious to stand against injustices. As the belief in the future state of reward and punishment is indispensable to the organization of justice for the believers. The sermons, followed by frequent protests, produce a religio-political configuration where Masla-e Kashmir, that is Kashmir issue, is part of their moral commitment. The everyday presence of people in sacred spaces bring about religious sensibility and structure the condition of their collective existence and values. It also performs an important role in shaping people's concept of justice, morality, and a good life. During the fieldwork for my research, quite intriguingly, a man in his mid-60s stated, and I quote, "Allah, that is God, is indiscernible to human eyes, but Hazrat Bal's presence before us is a proof of his divinity, hence a conduit to the invisible world." I would like to conclude, before concluding, I would like to highlight a few points. Number one, the political leaders in Kashmir Valley from a range of positions have drawn legitimacy by not only linking Islam, but also its icon to the political movements, that is mosques and shrines. The engagement of religion in political movement add further credibility to the struggle and command participation that is difficult for the believer to disregard. Second, as far as the contour of the public sphere in most Muslim societies, including Kashmir, is concerned, it has evolved at the intersection of conflict and religion. And within that context, place of worship provide a key space in inciting and legitimizing mass movement. And this complex element of social and cultural mix needs to be taken into account if we are to fully understand the dynamics of subaltern insurgency, wherein the sacred spaces explain the social and cultural meaning of localness as defining the territorial limit within which insurgency or agitation occurs. However, in Kashmir studies for long, as Professor Reeta rightly argues in her book, shared public understanding of the nation in both India and Kashmir continues to be filtered through the lenses of state-constructed secular politics. Therefore, we advocate that the history of political movements in post-colonial societies, such as the one in Kashmir, must be understood within its own terms. Any mobilization, whether economic, political, or cultural, never happens in a social vacuum. It is always intertwined with the meanings that are internal to society. I would like to end with the words of Cornel West, who says, and I quote, "The culture of the wretched of the earth is deeply religious. To be in solidarity with them requires not only an appreciation of what they are up against, acknowledgement, of what they're up against, but also an appreciation of how they cope with their situation," unquote. Thank you so much for listening.